everyone, today we will be doing reading 17 which comes under equity valuation subject and just the highlights, just a kind of a summary, important words, keywords used, important topics, important formulas, and that we will go through that. So LOS 17A is define valuation and intrinsic value and explain sources of perceived mispricing. So valuation is the process of determining what the value of an asset. Now intrinsic value, which we'll call IV, intrinsic value. So it is the valuation of an asset or security by someone who has the knowledge about that security, who has the full information about it, who understand the characteristics of that company or the issuing firm. Okay, so that is intrinsic value. Now there is one intrinsic value by analyst and there is intrinsic value actual. So now intrinsic value by analyst is there are equity research analysts, there are analysts who perform their own valuations. So the value that they are deriving is equity analyst value, and the value that actually the intrinsic value of that company, which the actual value that should be of that stock, is the IV actual. Now we know that the markets are not perfectly efficient in terms of information. So because of that, the market price will not always be equal to the intrinsic value of that stock. So there is, for example, intrinsic value derived by analyst, then there is actual intrinsic value, and then there is this market price. So now the difference between the actual intrinsic value and the market price is the actual mispricing, because this is the actual intrinsic value. स्टॉक की ये वैल्यू होनी चाहिए बट मार्केट में ये वैल्यू है. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल व्हाट डज दिस मीन्स दैट द स्टॉक इज अंडर वैल्यूड. उसका वर्थ ज़्यादा है, उसकी वैल्यू कम है, अंडर वैल्यूड है. ठीक है, क्लियर. देन इसके बीच का जो डिफरेंस है इट इज नोन एज एक्चुअल मिसप्राइसिंग, कि भाई ये इतनी मिसप्राइसिंग हुई है. एनालिस्ट ने जो वैल्यू निकाली और जो एक्चुअल इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू है, ये क्या होगा? ये वैल्यूएशन एरर कहलाएगा. This is valuation error. Because of certain error in their certain assumptions, analyst value is coming different than the actual intrinsic value. Now, how do you calculate this valuation error? IV analyst minus IV actual. Now, intrinsic value by analyst minus the market price. The difference between the intrinsic value of the analyst and the market price is the difference between the actual intrinsic value and the market price plus the difference between the intrinsic value by analyst minus the intrinsic value actual. So basically it is actual mispricing plus valuation error. This is valuation error. This is valuation error. Then we come to LOS 17B. Explain the going concern assumption and contrast a going concern value to a liquidation value. Now going concern assumption is that the company will keep on operating, will keep on going till indefinite time period. Its operations will stay intact. Right? That is going concern concept. Now going concern value is what? In our cash flow valuation models, in our valuation models, we take out the terminal value. Terminal value is the company will keep existing till infinity. So that is the terminal value, the remaining value. Liquidation value is, this is the assumption that the company won't last forever. It will have to be liquidified. It will not continue to operate in the business, and this is the difference between our assets and liabilities at fair value. So it is basically of the estimate of what the assets of the firm would bring if sold separately, net of company's liabilities. So at fair value means at right now if you sell the assets and net of the company's liabilities, what value you get, that is a liquidation value. And now coming on to LOS 17C, which is describe definitions of value and justify which definition of value is most relevant to public company valuation. So there is fair market value and then there is investment value. So fair market value is what? It is the value, is the price at which a willing seller and a willing seller is ready to sell the asset, and a willing and informed buyer is ready to buy the asset, and when there are no buyer specific synergies. That is fair market value. That any seller and any buyer, any seller will sell that asset in that price, and any willing buyer with no specific particular buyer specific synergies will be ready to buy it. Buyer specific synergies means, for example, if you are already in a food chain business, or for example, suppose let's take the example of Facebook and Instagram. Now since or WhatsApp and Instagram. So in WhatsApp, it's both are social network platforms, right? So there is buyer specific synergies. आप WhatsApp पे जो बात करोगे उसके हिसाब से आपको Instagram पे ऐड आएगा. So this is buyer specific synergies. आपके जो WhatsApp पे कॉन्टैक्ट्स हैं उस हिसाब से आपको फॉलो सजेशंस आएंगे Instagram पे. तो ऐसे कोई बायर स्पेसिफिक सिनर्जीज रहेगी तो वो फेयर वैल्यू नहीं कहलाएगी. देन इट विल बिकम इन्वेस्टमेंट वैल्यू. ओके, इट इज द वैल्यू ऑफ अ स्टॉक टू अ पर्टिकुलर बायर बिकॉज वो उनके बिजनेस को फायदा दे रहा है उस पर्टिकुलर कंपनी को खरीदना, राइट. सो दिस इज टू टाइप्स ऑफ वैल्यू, फेयर मार्केट वैल्यू, इन्वेस्टमेंट वैल्यू. नाउ वी कम ऑन टू LOS 17D. Sorry. Describe applications of equity valuation. So when you value the equity, there are different applications. For example, stock selection, which stock to buy, which stock not to buy. This we do at an individual level as well. Then mergers and acquisition. So while there is merger happening, acquisition happening, so that at that time also you need equity valuation. You need to find out the value of the asset, the company. Then minority shareholders. So for minority shareholders, whenever you need to find out the fair price of the company so that minority shareholders get the right price. Then while the company is coming out with strategies, so they would like to finalize the strategy which increases the shareholders wealth, which maximizes shareholders value. So that time equity valuation helps. And then for a private business valuations also you do equity valuations, because those are private business. You want to know the price or your the value of your holdings in that private business. So at that time you will do equity valuation. Then for portfolio management, so in portfolio you have different securities, and for that purpose also we need to value each security and then create a composite portfolio. Coming on to the next LOS, which is LOS 17E. Describe questions that should be addressed in conducting an industry and competitive analysis. So, while we are conducting industry competitive analysis, so here Porter's 5 forces have been described. That is supplier power, the suppliers of your raw materials. How much power do they have? Because for example, एयरक्राफ्ट इंडस्ट्री, एयरप्लेन्स इंडस्ट्री, सो वहाँ पे स्पेसिफिक सप्लायर्स हैं आपके रॉ मटेरियल्स के, आपके पार्ट्स के, राइट. तो वहाँ पे उनकी पावर बहुत ज़्यादा है. सो बिजनेस का जो डिपेंडेंसी है वो उन पे ज़्यादा है. उस हिसाब से फिर हम बिजनेस को वैल्यू करेंगे, इंडस्ट्री को उस हिसाब से हम देखेंगे. बायर पावर, बायर की पावर अगर ज़्यादा है, बिकॉज इफ देर आर ओनली फ्यू बायर्स फॉर सर्टन पर्टिकुलर थिंग, ठीक है, कोई एक फ्यू बिग बायर्स है तो उनकी पावर ज़्यादा रहेगी. एंड उसके बेसिस पे फिर आपका कंपनी का काफ़ी डिपेंड करेगा एनालिसिस. फॉर एग्जांपल कस्टमर रिलेशनशिप्स दैट वी वैल्यू. सो इफ देर आर ओनली अ फ्यू बिग कस्टमर्स ऑफ द कंपनी, then they have greater power, because if you also have substitutes, if the company has substitutes, then the buyer can shift to the substitute, your customer will go away. So threat of substitute is also plays an important role. and threat of new entrants. Because if new people will enter, new businesses will enter into your industry, and if there is no entry barriers, then there will be liquidation, right? The buyers will move, shift to them, suppliers will shift to them. So it's a threat. How the company operates among all these forces, that is one of the important aspect of our valuation, which is seen in the cash flows as well. Then there are strategies a company may employ in order to compete and generate profit. That is cost leadership strategy. Now, cost leadership strategy means you can lower your cost. If you lower your cost, you can sell the product at a cheaper price as compared to your competitors. But this can only happen when you have economies of scale, right? This can only happen when you have economies of scale. Pardon my writing. Then there is product differentiation. One way you can stand out amongst your competitors is you bring new features to your product, you differentiate your product, especially when you are in a market where there are many substitutes, many competitors with similar kinds of products. Then you need to bring some product differentiation. For example, the best example is the toothbrush market. So then we have Sensodyne bringing various variations, sensitivity, and then there are other variations also. Then we have Colgate. So Colgate also there is salt and different things, neem and all. So what are they doing? They are doing differentiation. That's how they are trying to capture the market. And then there is focus strategy, which means it employs one of the previous strategies within a particular segment of the industry in order to gain a competitive advantage. Now, the basic building blocks of equity valuation come from accounting information contained in the firm's reports, in the firm's annual reports and releases, press releases and all. So the quality of financial statement information is very important. They are audited, they are not audited, they are right, wrong, how are they presented. Then the quality of earnings. Now what comes here, that revenue recognition. To show higher revenue, you might recognize the revenue, which means you might bill to the customers, but you might not ship the product. So that is bill and hold scheme. That is what bill and hold. Then there is reclassifying non-operating income. So some companies, what they do, they reclassify the gains of non-operating income as operating income to show higher operating income, to show that their books are good, right? To show that their earnings are good. So they might do this, that they might classify the income which is actually non-operating, they might classify it as operating income, because it is in the hands of the management's discretion. Especially when you talk about management's discretion, so this depreciation, amortization, these are in the methods that you use for depreciation is in the management's hands. So they might use a method which inflate your operating income, because then there is one thing, that is textbooks and your financial books. Your textbooks are different. Different. The depreciation applied here can be different from the depreciation applied here. Then there is expense recognition. Some expenses might be capitalized, so that in one particular year you are not showing a large expense which drives down your operating income. So all these things companies do, and we have to make sure the quality of this information. Then comes another LOS 17F, which is contrast absolute and relative valuation models and describe examples of each type of model. Okay. So there are absolute valuation models and there are relative valuation models. Under absolute valuation models, there is a dividend discount model, discounted cash flow model, asset based model. For dividend discount model, it depends on the dividends you will receive in future. So if the shareholders receive a stable dividend, If the company has a policy of, for example, 5% dividend or a stable amount of dividend, then we can value this based on the dividends by doing the present value of the dividends. And that also we have studied this in level 1 as well, multi-stage, single, and also different types of dividend discount models, Gordon growth discount model and all. Discounted cash flow model, we have free cash flow to the firm or free cash flow to the equity. So this is our basic cash flow model, that we discount the cash flows of the firm to the present value at a discount rate. So here discount rate plays a very important role. And then we have asset based model, which is this estimates a firm's value as the sum of the market value of the assets it owns or controls. Then there is relative valuation model. So there are multiples, for example, price by earnings multiple or EV by EBITDA multiples. EV by revenue multiples are also used. An industry where depreciation is an important aspect, because that is a capital intensive industry. So there EBITDA is a better figure than EBIT, because depreciation plays an important role. So we have to look at all those things for a company which is in its early stage. So revenue, EV by revenue will be a better figure because EBITDA might be negative. So all those things matter. But these are the examples of each type of model. Then we come to another LOS, which is LOS 17G, describes some of the parts valuation and conglomerate discounting. So some of the parts means if there are conglomerates are what? Companies which are in different segments, different types of businesses. For example, ITC, it is in hotels business, FMCG business, and your tobacco business. Now they have divested from the hotels business, so now they are split. But that is a conglomerate. So for example, there is a conglomerate that has segment A, segment B, segment C, and we have read this in our level 1 that 10% of the earnings, if there are more than 20% of earnings from any particular segment, then they have to report that segment's earnings separately. So companies report through that, we can value each segment, and when you value each segment and then when you add that up, that will be more than the market value of the whole company. So the market value of the company as a whole will be less than when you add the value of each part of the business. This is known as, this difference is conglomerate discount. Now why is there conglomerate discount? Because an investor might want to invest just in one particular segment because that segment is booming, but instead they have to invest in the whole company. Therefore there is a discount. Also, for example, capital. A company, there is capital inefficiency. A company is investing more capital in a particular segment where that segment is also not growing that much. That segment is not giving that much profit. So that's why also there is this conglomerate discount applied. Also, the company might have pursued any unrelated business acquisitions to hide poor operating performance of one segment, and also the company can hide poor operating performance of one segment by doing certain acquisitions or certain other things through other segments. So because of all of this, there is conglomerate discount. Now last we have is LOS 17H, which is explain broad criteria for choosing an appropriate approach for valuing a given company. The approach that we talked about before, that is this. So which model are you going to use? Which approach are you going to use to value a company? So it depends. Is it dividend paying? Does the company pays dividend? If yes, then okay, then dividend discount model is possible. Otherwise DDM wouldn't be possible. And the dividends should be stable. Then are the forecast inputs available? Are you able to forecast the inputs? Do you have the inputs to forecast the financial information, to forecast the financial statements? Then only your DCF method will be possible. Now, are there too much intangible assets? Because if there are too many intangible assets, how will you be able to do asset based model? Because in that, market value of the assets are required. Then comparable companies. If there are comparable companies, then you can do relative valuation model. then you can do this, because this requires comparable companies. But if there is no proper comparable company for your company in research, then relative valuation model wouldn't work. So you can also use a combination of different methods. And then there is something called as reconciliation of methods, that the methods should reconcile. If you're using different methods, different weights different weights are given to each method. For example, if you see that okay, both method is equal, so you will give 50 weight. Or if you see that no, the comparable companies are not exactly in the same business, so you might give 25% weightage to the comparable company method and 75% weightage to your DCF method. So like this you do, and then the value that comes, the value from different methods, the value of the company that comes from different methods, that value should reconcile. It also gives you a cross check that yes, your valuation inputs are correct, your assumptions are correct. So this was all about reading 17. Do let me know any doubts, and I hope, because I'm studying this right now, I'm not teaching you something like that, because I've studied this chapter and I had just made the notes, and I'm just sharing my knowledge, what I have studied, with you. So it's more of study with me, then then I'll teach you. It's not I'll teach you, it's more like study with me, because I'm preparing for CFA level 2, and I feel this is a better way to learn and to share the knowledge I have, and let's study together. Thank you. Bye.